So I'd like to call to order the December 14th, 2021 meeting of the Monroe County Plan Commission to order. Mr. Wilson, will you please call the roll?
I will. Margaret Clements.
Here.
Ronnie Ryan Randolph.
Here.
Bernie Garitas.
Here.
Jeff McKim. Dee Owens, I think I heard her.
Yes.
Jerry Pittsford.
Here.
Jim Steenbrook.
Here.
Julie Thomas. Amy Thompson.
Here.
Okay, as of present, we have 8 members in a quorum. Beth Cates from the city. Anybody from the city? Okay, we have 8 members, or excuse me, 7 members in a quorum.
Okay, wonderful. Would you be so kind as to introduce the evidence?
I request that the following items be introduced in evidence for tonight's meeting. Monroe County Comprehensive Plan as adopted and amended. Monroe County Zoning Ordinance as adopted and amended. Monroe County Subdivision Ordinance as adopted and amended. And the Rules of Procedure of the Monroe County Plan Commission, as well as the cases docketed and advertised for hearing on tonight's agenda.
Is there a motion to approve?
I move we approve the evidence as introduced.
Second.
I'll call the roll on the admission of evidence. Ronnie Ray Randolph.
Yes.
Bernie Garitas.
Yes.
Dee Owens. I'll go on to Jerry Pittsford.
Yes.
Did
Jim
you call
Steenbrook.
me? I'm sorry. If
I
you
did,
did, I got a ding. Sorry.
Okay, so it's a vote on the approval of the evidence.
Yes.
Okay. Jim Steenbrook.
Yes.
Julie Thomas is not here yet. Amy Thompson
Yes.
and Margaret Clemens.
Yes.
The vote on approval of evidence is 7-0 in favor.
How about the agenda, people? You want to move to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I'll take the vote on the approval of tonight's agenda as advertised and sent out in the packet. Bernie Garitas.
Yes.
Dee Owens.
Yes.
Jerry Pittsford.
Yes.
Jim Steenbrook.
Yes.
Amy Thompson.
Yes.
Margaret Clemens.
Yes.
Ronnie Randolph.
Yes.
Tonight's agenda is approved by a 7-0 vote.
We have 2 sets of minutes of our meetings to review and approve or reject. Is there any motion to approve the minutes from the June and the July 2021 meeting?
So
I'll
moved.
move to second.
Okay, here we go again, Larry.
Okay, I am taking the roll of approval of both sets of minutes as included in the packet. Dee Owens.
Yes.
Jerry Pittsford.
Yes.
Jim Steenbrook.
Yes.
Amy Thompson.
Yes.
Margaret Clemens.
Yes.
Ronnie Ray Randolph.
Yes.
Bernie Garitas.
He's muted, Bernie.
Oh, excuse me. Yes.
Okay, the minutes are approved by a 7-0 vote.
Larry,
Wonderful.
if I may, I did not actually make that June meeting, so I'd like to change my vote to an abstention in light of my absence, please.
Okay, I will change the vote on the June meeting to 6-0 with 1 abstention.
Thank
Okay.
you.
June Plan Commission minutes.
Okay, so let's move on to new business because the unfinished business has been continued by staff. The first item on the agenda is ZOA-21-8, and this is the amendment to the Monroe County Zoning Ordinance, Chapter 815, Site Plans, having to do with certified site plans. And Jackie, if you'd be so kind as to go over this.
Dear Margaret. So this is a request for a change to chapter 815, which is site plan review. And we've seen this a few times before. It's come back with some edits made by staff and also in consideration with local land surveyors and someone from the building association. So there's been a little bit of changes between the last time. So the way that this section will now work is that it is separating out the different types of certified site plan, certified plot plan, or scaled plot plan will work. So if you're commercial, you will still be required to have a certified site plan. That's currently the requirement, and that's also going to be the requirement moving forward. We've also tried to relate this to the use table in chapter 802. So all of the uses that we have for site plans, we went ahead and listed those out so that there's no confusion with whatever commercial use that you're having on a property, that you will have to do a commercial certified site plan if you're one of these uses listed in this table. Residential uses, those are going to require a certified plot plan, which is a lower bar for certification, and it will be requiring, boundaries as well as proposed buildings, existing structures, enough information so that our zoning inspector and staff can review and make sure that proposed structures meet all the requirements. We currently don't have a requirement for certification of site plans or plot plans for new residential uses. So this would be something that would be new. And we wanted to make it a little bit clear in the cases in which certification would be required. So under accessory, so this is going to include residential uses and agricultural uses, allows expansions to primary structures and new construction of accessory structures. So if you have an existing single family residential use on a property and you want to do an addition or build a detached garage, we are thinking that starting out, we are not going to require that to have a certified plot plan, that you could use a scaled drawing that could be done without certification. So moving down, this table then relates to the the requirements that will need to be shown on either the certified site plan, certified plot plan, or the scaled drawing. So these letters also correspond with the illustration in these different colored boxes, so that you don't have to always go up and down to know which should be required for the type of building that you're going to construct. So as I mentioned before, it lays out the plot plan or the certified site plan or the certified plot plan. And then there's a list of requirements below. As I mentioned before, we did work with a few local land surveyors in town and have made some changes and listened to their feedback on this. There are a few things that we wanted to keep in the requirements that were asked to be taken out or changed. And I'm happy to go over that if anyone has any questions. But I wanted to just give a broad overview of the types of requirements that we are looking to implement for, this would be especially different for residential structures, new residential structures requiring this. And then also there was a comment at our administrative meeting to show 15% slope lines or buildable area. We thought that would be super helpful, so we did add that in. And just to note, these requirements are in addition to any other chapter requirements. So say chapter 825, which is the environmental constraints overlay, those requirements would be in addition to these requirements. So we didn't want to be duplicative, but there are other things that may need to be shown, including like 12% slope lines if you are in the Eco 1 area proposing a home. So if there are any questions on this, I can take any questions that you have now, go over anything.
So do any members of the Plan Commission have questions for Ms. Nestor Jelen? Mr. Enright Randolph?
Yeah, Jackie, you alluded to wanting to keep a few things intact with recommendations of having them removed by, I would assume, the land surveyors. Was that correct?
Yes.
So would you want to just kind of go over that? I'm just kind of curious.
Sure. So on this, let's see if we go on down. These comments, the second, starting on page 13, are actually the comments that Eric Deckard let me know over the phone. And he said this was representing 4 land surveyors and 1 building association person. So I'll just go through the things that we did not change. So Eric had recommended a definition of plot plan and site plan somewhere in the chapter. That is something that we did not want to put in chapter 815, but we do have another ordinance amendment to chapter 801, which is definitions. And at that time, we can add in definitions to plot plan and site plan. To date, we've utilized the requirements that have to go into a site plan as the definition of a site plan because it's contained in the chapter, but we can certainly try to better delineate the difference between a plot plan and a site plan in that chapter 801. We did make the changes to be more inclusive of the residential 2-family and agricultural structures. We broke those out per the different categories. We did make the changes to just specify site plan or plot plan and added the terms surveyor. Septic tank and field, there was a question as to whether it was required for larger lots to locate those. And I had responded back to Eric that we did need to include those even for larger lots because we are responsible for checking separation distances between septic tank fields and karst areas or property lines, structures, things like that. Instead of striking wetlands, we made it so that it was saying illustrate any apparent or visible karst or wetland features on the plot plan. And then we made a change to easements to say shown on any recorded deed or plat instead of current deed or plat. We wanted there to be a little bit more description into the easements, even if it was on a prior recorded plat. Signage, there was a question as to whether that is needed for accessory structures. That's an optional change that if people want to apply for a sign, then it will need to be on the site plan. So we didn't want to remove that. This was changed from 1 foot to 2 foot because there was a conversation with the land surveyors that if we added 1 foot, it would be an additional cost and also conflict with the best available contours that they had readily for the rest of the site. And so we changed this to 2 foot contours or spot elevations as suggested. And then we decided to break out construction plans and add floor plans for residential. And then we tried to make it a little bit clear that erosion control methods be shown on the plot plan, not necessarily that they must be followed because there was some concern about Rule 5 compliance and that not all lots would be subject to Rule 5. So that is a summary of the requirements, Tron. Let me know if there's anything that you have specific questions on.
Thank you. I was just kind of curious of your thoughts behind those. I just want to extend that thank you again to everyone that had kind of worked together on making some of these changes. I think it really enhanced the amendment that we have in front of us today. Great job.
I wanted to note the arrival of Julie Thomas. So we now have 8 members present.
Okay, are there any other questions from members of the Plan Commission? Bernie, Mr. Garitas?
Yeah, I just kind of some remarks. first off, I want to, again, I've done this multiple times over the last several months because Larry and Jackie have both done a nice job in certain circumstances, reaching out to the public and, you know, design professionals in different parts of the community that have a vested interest in things that we do. And this is another example. And of course, I commend Eric Deckard for sitting down and questioning some of the professionals in the community. But I know also he reached out to Eric Meeks, who practices in another county that doesn't do a lot of work in Monroe County. And Eric is an exceptional land surveyor. He started a business a few years ago and even spoke with Eric a little bit. And I had talked to Eric before he had, just right before he talked to spoke with Jackie, and that interaction that Eric and Jackie had was nothing but professional and informative. And I just want to take my hat off to staff. You know, the two things that I want to make sure that we pay attention to, and Jackie's said both of them, but one is that we're looking at a consistency between this section and other sections of the ordinance. And Jackie and I spoke about that. And then the other thing is, I think that, you know, when it comes to some of these plot plans, the key is to give staff a commitment from a petitioner and a legible plan that they can discern what's proposed and what's currently there. And I think that overall this does that. You know, I think that some of our requirements are a little heavy-handed at times as far as what the timing constraints are and what the level of information and frankly what the assurance of the information is. And again, in Jackie's notes, she took out things like the wetlands and things that, you know, for some of these uses, platted subdivisions and things where all that information's already set up. Different realms of professionals aren't equipped to handle that. They're just not able to take that liability on, which is again what we always talk about. So nice job. Overall, this is something I think I can support unless there's other questions or feedback from the public that would change my mind. So thanks for the indulgence, Margaret.
Thank you, Mr. Garitas. Are there other questions or comments?
I'll just note, Bernie, as a follow-up, I did keep in illustrate any visible or apparent wetlands, and that was something I think was a little bit more amenable to some of the land surveyors for a plot plan than going in further detail of like karst reports or karst studies, floodplain studies. So that's still a requirement, but now it's visible or apparent.
Yeah, I saw that, and that's what I was alluding to. Thanks, Jackie. Thanks for clarifying that.
One other addition that I think might be helpful, and I want to make sure this is the best possible and clearest text amendment before it gets to makes a vote to the plan from the Plan Commission to the commissioners, is I'm noticing that it may be clear, especially under this residential category, to have a note similar to what I have here under accessory, just to say that this applies to all brand new construction and does not apply to additions or expansions. And then under this one, I would put a note that says applies to all commercial development, regardless of new construction, addition, expansion. I spent a lot of time looking at the individual uses, and I think I may have missed that critical detail. So I do want to make that amendment before we vote on this.
Mr. Enright Randolph?
I guess, Jackie, would you be more comfortable if we brought this up at the end of the meeting with those edits, and then we could take action there if our president would indulge us?
I think if I make changes to the packetron, I might feel more comfortable allowing this to go to, as much as I don't want this to keep getting delayed, but another meeting, because I just want to make sure we're compliant with all notice requirements, and I just want to do that properly.
Yes, it also says that it's a preliminary hearing. This isn't the final hearing of this, so I'd be uncomfortable with taking action on it tonight.
Apologies, I didn't notice the preliminary hearing,
Yeah.
so my concerns are mute.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Moving on, do we take comments from the public on this tonight, Jackie?
Yes, you can take.
Okay,
comments.
so I'd like to open this up to any members of the public who would like to speak on this. And we have a 3-minute time limit for members of the public to speak either in favor of the proposed amendment or against the proposed amendment. So I would like the members of the public who are in favor of this change to the zoning ordinance to please raise their hand in the Zoom or press *9 on their telephone to speak for 3 minutes. And that's for people in favor of this amendment to the Monroe County zoning ordinance. So if you would be so kind, Jackie, as to when you see people raise their hand, to acknowledge them.
I don't see anyone, Margaret.
Okay, is there anyone in opposition to this? If so, please raise your hand in the Zoom window or press *9 on your telephone to be acknowledged. Okay, so we don't take any action on this tonight, and so it's tabled until our next regular meeting of the Plan Commission, which will be in January, right? The third Tuesday in January.
Correct.
Okay, moving on, we have item number 2, which is REZ-21-6 Cook Polymer Technology Rezone from PUD and IG to LI. This is a preliminary hearing. They're requesting a waiver of the final hearing, and this is for 2 12.29 acre parcel in Van Buren Township at 3800 West Constitution Avenue. And I think Tammy Behrman will be presenting this. So Tammy, if you're here.
Yep, I'm here. Hopefully you can hear me.
Thank you.
Great. All right. So we'll just jump into the presentation. This is 2 separate parcels located in Van Buren Township Section 1 at 3800 West Constitution Avenue. This is the site conditions here. It already is mostly built out. Reason why they're here is they're wanting to maybe add some more parking. There is something missing to the north here. This is where the Indiana the BMV branches that most of you have hopefully gone to at some point in the last year or not. It is currently zoned PUD, and these are 2 separate lots. So they're zoned PUD, and then one of them is zoned split zone with IG, which is general industrial. Back in May 30th of 2018, a plat was recorded that did allow for this split zoned lot to be created. And there were discussions back then in 2018 that should the petitioner want to further develop this lot, that they would need to remedy the zoning here, and whether that was through an outline plan amendment for the PUD portion and rezoning part of it PUD, or trying to come up with a more applicable zone. That was brought up. I will mention here that because we have 2 separate platted lots of record, that we have a condition of approval that they combine these for planning and zoning purposes, and that can be done using language from Chapter 804. So this is an old PUD that we were working with. Park 37 PUD was approved in 1986 by the city of Bloomington. You can see the 2 lots up here that were impacted. And what dictated PUDs back then in the city of Bloomington was a 1973 ordinance. And so when we came upon the question of, well, what are the open space standards for this development that we were trying to pre-design, we came to a halt because this 1973 ordinance requires a 40% open space requirement. And just as an example, our current PUD standards require 25%. And what they're wanting to rezone to is light industrial, which requires 20% open space requirements. So this is really the crux of why they couldn't really work with this split zoned lot. Comprehensive plan has this as employment. And if you looked in the packet, I went and highlighted in green all of the things that match with employment district and with this, Cook Polymer Corporation business. I couldn't find any dings against it. I mean, the comprehensive plan completely is in line with rezoning this to light industrial. And just a quick note that we are going to be keeping this property within our jurisdiction for a while. It is not part of the proposal to annex to the city of Bloomington. I've included the highway and stormwater comments. So the highway department is actually aware of a multi-use path that will be installed and is being proposed right now to go across here to access Karst Farm Greenway. So it's a connector trail. One of the conditions of approval that you'll see is that they would like to see some temporary right-of-way kind of incorporated into this as a written commitment. And then the MS4 coordinator did note that this is in a critical watershed. It's the, I think it's the Cave, I can't tell if it's Cave Creek or Sinking Creek. I think it's Cave Creek.
Sinking Creek.
Oh, thanks, Kelsey. Sinking Creek. And she's also recommended a few extra additional drainage standards for any further development that occurs here. And just to kind of reiterate, one of those conditions is that in this bottom right corner, you can see this hatched area. This is temporary right-of-way that the highway department would like as a part of this rezone to be a written commitment so that it doesn't have to be, I guess, purchased, you know, that there doesn't have to be a monetary exchange for that temporary right-of-way. And this is the connector project that is currently being designed and gone through a different process. And then we compared some of the design standards. We think that light industrial should work with keeping these folks in compliance. But I did want to point out that we've got, you know, the PUD recommends a 40% open space, which we're right at already. The IG zone has a maximum building coverage of 70%, which is a different kind of standard under the Chapter 833. And then what they're hoping to rezone to is light industrial. And though we're in a critical watershed, I think the MS4 coordinator felt comfortable that, you know, any further impervious surface that was added to this lot could be accommodated by their more restrictive drainage standards. And she can speak more to that if needed. The Plan Review Committee met on November 10th, and they generally supported this petition, but did not take a vote. However, they did make those 3 conditions that you'll see here in just a second. So recommendation, staff recommends approval of the rezone based on findings of fact and subject to the Monroe County Highway and MS4 coordinator reports with the following 3 conditions. 1, that combine lot 4A and lot 19 for planning and zoning purposes using language under 804-2B4. Number 2 is to submit a written commitment for temporary right-of-way for the Karst Farm Greenway connector trail along the north side of West Constitution Avenue, as specified in Exhibit 11 of the packet. And number 3, any further development must utilize the critical drainage area release rates for stormwater requirements. Does anyone have any questions? Tron's got his hand raised.
Mr. Enright Randolph?
Yes, thank you. This could be a Paul, Ben, or Tammy, please, if you're able to. Prairie easement, I guess. Could we dive into that a little more? I'm guessing just by my thoughts in temporary easement is as long as it's being used for the purpose intended, and that's going to be a trail, that easement is in place. I'm just a little curious well, as far as it being temporarily, what makes it, you know, allowed for county use, and then is there like a clause in there if we don't use it, we lose that easement? Because I'm more into making permanent trails, and the word temporary easement kind of makes me concerned a bit. So
I think Paul Satterley's here. I'll let him speak to that.
Yeah, Tron, it's temporary right away, and that's used for slope construction, so the dirt matches the level of the multi-use trail. And then once we're done reshaping the dirt, it goes back to the property owner. So we don't we actually don't need any permanent right of way along Constitution for the trail.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Paul.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Pittsford?
Oh, thank you, Madam President. My question is, I guess it's sort of interesting, but to what extent has the PUD that the city of Bloomington put on this been adhered to since its approval? I see a lot of properties in Park 37 that don't seem to meet the industrial use.
Yeah, that came up during staff discussions and it was very vague. But we felt like we needed to at least interpret it, you know, what we thought it needed to be, and which is why we ended up with this rezone here. But it was really hard to tell if that was a path we should even try to go down. And you know, in a couple of years, it's likely that all of this will be annexed over into the city of Bloomington, except for this lot, in which case we won't even be, you know, the county may not even be associating with the Park 38 PUD at all at that point.
Madam President, if I may be allowed to follow up.
Yes, please, Mr. Pittsford.
Ms. Bierman, you certainly make my point, and that is that the Park 37 PUD is about as relevant as the 37 in its name, which is now 69. It was not respected. It's not worth the paper it's written on. I feel this is an opportunity for the county to restore what the city of Bloomington intended to do. They sold this as a commercial and industrial park and then brought in a bunch of uses that are not appropriate to the area, intensified the travel in the area, and caused problems for those people who actually believed what the PUD said. So I definitely will be supporting this.
Are there other questions of staff from members of the Plan Commission? If none, we'll go to the petitioner or the petitioner's representative, and you have 15 minutes to present to the Plan Commission for this proposal. Do you see anyone, Jackie or Tammy?
I did see Hogan Helms I saw his name.
Yeah, Hogan, since you're on the phone, I believe you need to press star six.
So Mr. Helms, welcome to our Plan Commission meeting, and we'd like to hear from you. If you can press star 6 on your telephone, we'd like to hear your presentation. Thank you, Mr. Helms.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. We started this project, or is it identified as a need that the Cook Polymer Technology Group needed more parking because they are really busy and expanding their operations at this facility, and they have a lot of trouble finding parking spaces and having people park elsewhere and then either walk to the facility or get bused to the facility. And so this summer they came to us with the request to look at options to expand their parking on the property. And so we started come up with some concept plans to where we, showed parking here or mostly to the either the east side or the north side, where we're now kind of proposing it on the property. And we came up with what we thought was a good proposal. And so we went to the city and we said, or the county planning, and said, what all do we need to look out for? What kind of, hurdles do we need to jump? And they identified this green space requirement. And so that is what's driving this, as Tammy has pointed out. And so, yeah, we are looking, we think that the rezone it probably fits the use of the property as a light industrial use. If you look at a lot of the zoning around us that's not part of the PUD, as far as the stuff to the north and to the south, you're going to see a lot of stuff that's already zoned either light industrial or limited industrial or general industrial. And so it kind of fits how everything else is around there. That's not part of those original PUDs along State Road 37, and I can't remember if it was Mr. Pittsburgh had pointed out, but you can see that not many other people have really followed the PUD requirements as far as the green space, and so the current zoning only requires a 20 to 25% green space. I can't remember for a PUD, and so we just thought that they're trying to expand their business. They're hiring people. They're bringing jobs to this area, and they're producing a product that's needed. And to allow that, we need this rezone to be able to have the employees be able to come there so they can work and produce. And so that's like we said, the main driving force behind it is we need this rezone so that we can expand the parking lot. We are good with the recommendations from the staff as far as like combining lots 4A and 19 for planning and zoning purposes, and working with the county on getting that temporary right of way for the trail construction, as well as utilizing. I know that they've pointed out that there's a new stormwater drainage ordinance coming out, and so we have done all of our preliminary design with that in mind as far as the drainage calculations to try to help the critical watershed areas that are already affected in this area.
Thank you, Mr. Helms. Do you have anything further to say, or do you have other members of your team who would like to speak to us tonight?
I don't think so. We have a representative from the company on the line. If some of the questioning maybe would get outside of what I'm able to answer, but I don't think he planned on talking unless needed. So I think we're done with our presentation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Helms. So I would now like to turn it to members of the public, and we allow 3 minutes for those members of the public who would like to speak in favor or in opposition to the proposal. And if there are members of the public who are on Zoom would like to speak in favor of this proposal, please raise your hand or press *9 on your telephone if you're calling in. And Jackie or Tammy, if you see someone, if you'd be so kind as to call on them.
I don't see anyone.
Okay, well then we turn to those who are opposed to this proposal. If there are members of the public who would like to speak in opposition to this proposal, please make yourselves known by raising your hand or pressing *9 on the telephone. Seeing none, I'd like to turn it back to members of the Plan Commission for further discussion or a motion.
Madam President, I'm ready to make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Pittsburgh.
In case number REZ-21-6, a request for a rezone from PUD and IG to light industrial with a waiver of final hearing requested by the Cook Group Incorporated, care of Landmark Surveying Company. This is a property located at 3800 West Constitution Avenue. In this matter, I recommend approval based on the findings of fact and the conditions listed in the agenda for tonight's meeting. That is my motion in sum.
Thank you, Mr. Pittsburgh.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Enright Randall.
Madam President, I just want to clarify and ask Larry, do we need to read the conditions as stated into the record?
I will read them on the motion. I just want to clarify that this includes a waiver of the final hearing.
Yes, Mr. Pittsburgh requested that.
Okay. Yeah, I will read them as we do the motion. Okay, the motion is in regard to REZ-21-6, Cook Polymer Technology rezone from PUD and IG to light industrial. This is the preliminary hearing, but the motion is to approve a waiver of the final hearing. The motion is to approve the rezone for two 12.29 acre parcel in Van Buren Township at 3800 West Constitution Avenue. Motion is to approve, send a favorable recommendation to the Monroe County Commissioners based upon the findings of fact and subject to the Monroe County Highway and MS4 coordinators reports with the following three conditions for approval of the amendment to the zoning map. One, combine lot 4A and lot 19 for planning and zoning purposes using language under 804-2-B-4. Submit written commitment for temporary right-of-way for Cars Farm Greenway Connector Trail along the north side of West Constitution Avenue as specified in Exhibit 11. And any further development must utilize critical drainage area release rates for stormwater requirements. Again, a motion to yes vote is a motion to send a favorable recommendation to the Monroe County Commissioners to approve the rezoning subject to the conditions set forth in the motion and in staff report. Dee Owens,
Yes.
Ray Pittsford,
Yes.
Jim Steenbrook,
Yes.
Julie Thomas,
Yes.
Amy Thompson,
Yes.
Margaret Clemens,
Yes.
Ronnie Ryan Randolph,
Yes.
Bernie Garitas.
Yes.
Okay, the motion is approved by 8-0 vote and will now go on for a hearing before the Monroe County Commissioners.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Helms, for presenting this to us tonight, and good luck with your project. And we appreciate you in our community. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on now to item number 3 on the agenda, which is REZ-21-7, and that's 440 East Sample Road rezone from Ag RR to GB. And this is a preliminary hearing. A waiver of the final hearing has been requested. And so, Mr. Myers, if you would be so kind as to present this to us, I'd be most grateful.
Great, thank you very much. My connection is a bit unstable right now, so I may turn off my video in a little bit to improve that connection. Without further ado, this is REZ-21-7, the 440 East Sample Road rezone from Ag RR to GB. It is located at 440 East Sample Road. It's in Washington Township, Section 34. All right, so a bit of overview here. The request is to rezone a 1.647 acre parcel from agricultural rural reserve to general business. And the purpose of this rezone is to construct a 10,640 square foot building for commercial use as a Dollar General store. A use determination performed by planning staff earlier this year determined that the request of a Dollar General store would fit in line with grocery store from the Chapter 802 zoning ordinance. Grocery store is only permitted in the general business zoning district, and it's defined as a store primarily engaged in the retail sale of various canned foods and dry goods, either packaged or in bulk, such as tea, coffee, spices, sugar and flour, fresh fruits and vegetables, and frequently fresh smoked and prepared meats, fish, and poultry. So if rezone is approved for this site, the petitioner must submit a commercial site plan for review by the planning staff, and that is applicable. All requirements are applicable, meaning grading, parking, lighting, signage, anything that is required of the site will be required by the commercial site plan, which is all reviewed on a administrative level by planning staff. Okay, so here we have the location map, 440 East Sample Road, West Sample Road. We can see I-69 running north-south here along the western portion of the screen, or western portion of the map. And here we have the current zoning map and the comprehensive plan. Current zoning is agricultural reserve, as I've stated. There are some areas in the nearby proximity that are zoned limited business. I will note a few of these parcels were absorbed by the State Department for the expansion and development of the I-69 corridor. But then, as you can see here on the eastern portion of the property, all of that land is zoned agricultural rural reserve. Comprehensive plan on the right side of the screen We have it designated as rural residential. Same with the surrounding properties. Okay, here we have some department comments. Both of these comments are essentially for if the rezone were to be approved. They're just kind of details about how both of these departments would review the proposed development as it stands currently in its current configuration. And so some of the comments provided by Stormwater, are included here are about detention of stormwater, quality of outlets for discharging purposes, and then also concerns for karst and sinkholes. There are none that they could see on this site. And then other just general overview things that would come about through a commercial site plan review process, like stormwater infrastructure, maintenance of a detention pond, and so forth. The Highway Department also provided some comments regarding the roadway, stating that the driveway pavement needed to be extended out to the roadway edge line, and some other details here regarding a commercial driveway specifications that would need to be checked out and make sure that they can meet those standards if they can get to the development stage of the commercial site plan. All right, here we have some aerial pictometry of the site, kind of giving you an idea of what kind of structures are in the nearby area in the picture to your top left of the screen. And then the bottom right, it's pictured from the north. So this is a sample road down here. You can see that the roadway starts to narrow right after this petition site. And then the existing driveway cut here. And then this is a separate private driveway that comes back and services different properties back here to the south. Some on the ground imagery. This is pulled from Google Street View. So here's that existing driveway cut that just kind of stubs right here at the end. And then that existing private drive that comes all the way back, moving south to service some residences back here. And then the other remaining photographs here are just different angles of the property, all taken from sample road. So as you'll note, it's a fairly flat area. Again, as I stated, there's no apparent karst or sinkhole issues in this property. All right, here we have the petitioners submitted letter to the Plan Commission stating their intent to rezone the property from agricultural to general business in the purpose to provide an opportunity to build a Dollar General store for commercial use. They believe that it will fit the surrounding area as the area is being developed with improved road infrastructure, as well as stating that the State Department had taken some of the commercial property from the limited business zone that was once closer to I-69 away. And now they think this area is just expanding a little bit farther for some commercial use. Okay, here we have the petitioners submitted proposed site plan. On the next screen, I have a image zoomed in more of this left image here. It just gives you kind of an idea of what they expect to develop here on this property, given its acreage and other environmental factors. So here that you can see the proposed structure, 10,640 square feet, a large number of parking here. Planning staff would double check this this proposed site plan for all kinds of things like landscaping requirements, parking requirements, signage, lighting, all those. So everything you see here is just preliminary. All right, so this is the official first time the Plan Commission has heard this petition at a regular session. It was heard once before at the Plan Review Committee, which is a body that is tasked with evaluating a rezone petition with respect to how it fits with the comprehensive plan of Monroe County. And I will state that the Plan Review Committee voted 4-0 to forward this petition to the Planning Commission with a negative recommendation, citing that it didn't fit in line with the comprehensive plan of rural residential for this area. Then I also note that planning staff's recommendation to the Plan Commission is also to deny this request to the rezone of the property from agricultural rural reserve to general business based on the findings of fact. And there was a number of findings that planning staff found that was not suitable for this type of rezone, specifically findings A, B, C, and E, which are all found in the staff report packet. And now I will take any questions.
Okay, do members of the, Mr. Stainbrook?
Drew, individually, I've been favorably inclined towards toward the advantages of a Dollar General there specifically and by name. However, I think I'm a little bit of a literalist in this sense anyway, not always in reading the newspaper and some other current events, but in this case, the grocery store thing bothers me. I wasn't being entirely facetious when I said I patronize the Dollar General at Judah quite a bit. And yes, they have an admirable stock of foods and drinks, but percentage-wise, by and large, it's the inventory that Dollar General carries in probably most of their stores. Maybe a question then, Drew, out of all that talk is why do we have to use the grocery store designation in considering this? Hello, Drew.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I didn't get to get to my mute button.
Don't leave me hanging out here, buddy.
Thanks, Jim, for your question. So before we proceed with a rezone petition and accept a filing on something like this, we have the petitioner or prospective buyer submit what's called a use determination form. Through that process, the petitioner is to describe in as much detail as possible the activity or proposed activity they want to have on the site. Those forms are reviewed by the planning director with staff assistance. So I think Larry would be best equipped to answer the question of why a grocery store fits best with given the property description.
There you go, Drew. Pass it to the guy getting the big bucks. Thank you, Drew.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Stainbrook. Yes.
First of all, typically we would view, traditionally a Dollar General, we would view it as a convenience store, a variety store, or something like that. We do not have a variety store definition or ordinance. We do have a convenience store, but the square footage is limited in regard to the total square footage of the building. And it basically has usually associated with gasoline service sales. And evaluating Dollar General store, this is not the first use determination we've done for a Dollar General store. And many of their stores have increasingly been adding fresh fruits, vegetables, other food items. And if you look at a Dollar General ad and look at a Kroger ad, you'll find they're very similar. Kroger's also sells a lot of items that aren't groceries on this list.
Oh, come on, Larry. I didn't go to law school, I'll give you that one. And I'm not a planner, obviously, but hey, I'm in and out of the store all the time. But if that's the answer, you're still the director. There's the answer. I really object to the accuracy of that account. But let's move on. Drew, my second question, Roman numeral 2. I'm pretty much for honoring and respecting the rights of the people who live there or who bought there with the understanding that it was residential and an agricultural rural reserve. I've seen all too much of violations of that consideration, and I think there should be. So in other words, Drew, to come to a question, and you may want to pass this along. I think this one you can probably answer, or Jackie. Have there been any remonstrations? That's my second and final question, Drew.
I have not received any remonstrations from this petition at this time.
now, I promise to cease and desist here, but is any part of your reasoning, Drew, as a planner and with staff, due to the fact that there are people, I thought some houses there this evening I saw that I was not conscious of earlier. Are there homes that are going to be affected by this kind of commercial activity?
It's hard to determine impacts on property value from something like this. You know, it would really require an in-depth analysis. I do know that certain areas in the county, especially in the northern sections where I-69 went, I do know that there was some apprehension from that development going through to the taking of land and the dividing up of land up there. So I can't speak about commercial development coming in, but I do know that some people have been, you know, in the past upset about, you know, land getting taken or changing from what it once was to something more developed.
Yeah, or Larry letting things go in that under no way fit the zoning. There you go. I didn't leave that out tonight either. Drew, I said no more questions, but so I'll just make an observation that maybe on the south end there, on the west end, if there were some provision for a driveway, it looked as though maybe there was just the one driveway out onto Sample Road at the north. Well, that was an observation. Drew, I think you did a particularly good job, and it really hurts me to think in favor of this. But I believe overall, for whatever it's worth. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Stainbrook. Mr. Enright Randolph?
Yes, hi. So I guess right to my question, Drew, I think it was good to bring light to the fact that some of these already zoned light businesses were inquired by the construction of I-69. And will you go back up to that? There we go. You want to zoom? Can you zoom into the LB just a little bit? If not, no big deal. So there's 1, 2, 3 lots up there, kind of right to the ramp that were acquired. One, pretty significant. It's shown here, calculated on GIS as 8.1 acres. The entirety of that, I'm not going to do some rough numbers on the fly, but I would guess that's like 1/4 of the entire zone, and that was inquired by NDOT and is now property of the state. So Jim brought a great point up of the surrounding neighbors. You know, I see a lot of vacant lots. Also, the fact that property, Jackie came off camera real quick. Did you want to make a comment to that quickly, or was that relevant to you coming off camera?
I'll wait, John.
Okay. So my main point is I'm part of the PC, and we moved this with a negative recommendation because currently the way it stands, it doesn't really look like it fits. A couple other discussion items is the infrastructure out there was almost built to reach this parcel. So it's very interesting. I think Jim has a great point when he talks about his convenience of having a Dollar General store to pick up groceries. I think a lot of people in this surrounding area would benefit from that convenience. Might even keep some of the commerce exchanged in the county versus going to Morgan County. No, but you know, our council member is not here today, so I'll pin that. So to get to my point, the reason I wasn't favorable for this in the PRC is because I think we need a more extensive evaluation of this. And, you know, it's unfortunate that we're not prepared today because we don't know if, you know, these developers might want to revisit Monroe County and build a Dollar General. You know, we can't predict the future. So I had my questions answered with the fact that the light business has already kind of, you know, been acquired by the state. So there's less of an area to build on currently. there's a lot of vacant lots. And generally we need to look at this more extensively. That's the extent of my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Enright Randolph. Mr. Garatos?
Yeah, first off, I think coming down hard on the planning director with what the interpretation was. If you look at the Dollar General model, it's kind of across the board, and I wouldn't have known this except on frequent trips down to God's country, that being Knox County, Indiana, Vincennes. There's a Dollar General market that's along in Bicknell that it's a market. I've stopped in there to pick up odds and ends, and it surprised me that it was that. So I think that these can be hosted as a neighborhood market type store that I think are fairly affordable. And I think it could be a neighborhood draw. The Dollar General stores where boxes were stored in the aisles and, racks were rolled around because they had so much product for the size. I don't know if that's 100% the Dollar General framework that maybe I was used to when I was growing up as a kid. My mind's open on this. I wonder if we would see this store located one or two properties to the west, if our thought process would be different. It's just kind of on the outside edge of where the improvements came in for the highway. And, I think maybe with a little bit more information from the petitioner, this is the first hearing. I wouldn't be inclined to vote for anything tonight, but if they can support some of the things that our planning director introduced and talk a little bit about what the product they have is, it might open it up a little bit for some more discussion. So that's all I've got. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you, Mr. Garatos. Ms. Nestor Jelen?
Thanks, Margaret. I just wanted to point out something that Larry alluded to, and just to provide a little bit more specification. This use could have qualified as a convenience store, which is any retail establishment offering sale of prepackaged food products, household items, possibly gasoline sales, magazines, etc. But the maximum size for a convenience store is 3,500 square feet. This site is requesting a 10,000 plus square foot building, and it doesn't qualify for convenience store. So part of the issue is that they're asking for such a large building footprint. The limited business could accommodate a convenience store. However, only general business can accommodate a grocery store. Also, you'll note in the packet that the site does not have access to sewer. So I just want to bring those to your attention. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nestor Jelen. Mr. Pittsford?
Thank you, Madam President. I am concerned about the lack of access to sewer, but I really think that there's potential for this idea here to serve a neighborhood. As I look at this picture in front of me, I see a lot of residential opportunity for people who want to hop on 69 and go north to Indy for work or go south to Bloomington. So I think Dollar General may be out over their skis a little bit here, and we're just not seeing it. And I heard Jackie mention something about convenience store, and I know that this area has been deprived of a convenience store with the closing of the gas station there. That was just off 37, exactly right there. Thank you, Jackie. So I see that property as an opportunity really for, God forbid, a truck plaza or something like that. If somebody can really get in there and do that whole area, because I see a lot of open ground to the north of that. But a truck plaza doesn't always hit all the needs of the residential. So I've got an open mind to this, as Bernie said. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pittsford. And I'll just recognize myself and state a few kind of general observations since I'm immersed in the process of annexation and remonstration. These are the holidays. There's an awful lot that's going on right now. This area was really slated for development, but the residents overwhelmingly rejected that and convinced the city council that we're not developing north. And so as we go forward with our ordinance changes, and despite the fact that infrastructure had been invested in up in that area for the roads, the residents have resoundingly said and convinced city council that they are not going to be part of the city, that they don't want the dense development. And even though it's on the north end of the town on the way to Indianapolis, they don't want what the city is selling. So I would say that there's a lot of tug and pull, a lot of push and pull, and we should be thinking about this very deliberately. And with that gas station that has been pointed out, I would rather see that redeveloped perhaps into a Dollar General store. And if there's some way that the county could work with the petitioner in order to make that location for what they intend to do, that would be great. But right now, it's uncertain what's going to happen through the development ordinance, whether or not it's going to remain agricultural or whether or not it's going to become suburban or suburban residential. I think not. I think it won't because of the overwhelming reaction of the residents in the area. And so I know that it's not going to be approved tonight, but I just want to throw that out there. There's a lot going on, a lot of citizens and residents who aren't able to attend every meeting that's demanded of them in the chaotic bureaucracy that exists in our community right now. But, you know, I urge caution right now. And that having been said, Commissioner Thomas, I'd like to recognize you.
Thank you. I'll be brief. The lot is just not the right size, no matter what. I mean, I think Ms. Nestor-Jelen really pointed that out well. This is a real issue of a lot size, and cramming something in just to do it is inappropriate. I do agree, however, that as we move forward with our CDO, that this whole frontage area needs to be looked at. How much of it do we want to have as, you know, the acmeization of Monroe County, so we look like every single other interstate in the country? How much of it should be unique? How much of it should be different? And I would like us to think about that in the future, but I'll leave it at that. I just don't think this is the right fit for this.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. Mr. Pittsford?
Yes, thank you again, Madam President. I don't want to be confused that I was making an argument that this is a right fit. I just didn't want to close the door on this opportunity. And if you go back about 16, maybe 17 years, development along this corridor for residential was discussed, and extending city utilities. And with with your objection, I'm going to go ahead and say, regardless of annexation, there was talk about extending City of Bloomington utilities to the north. But there are geological and topographical issues with accomplishing that. With that said, though, I think this area presents an opportunity to provide local service and interstate travel service. And I really don't want us to close our eyes to the opportunity, even if it means working with CBU to extend services out there in whatever manner is possible or appropriate. And those are my comments in sum, and I'll just stand down now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pittsford. Mr. Enright Randolph?
Yes, and honestly, a lot of my comments are pretty in line with Jerry's. Definitely don't want to close the door. I'll also state, and I'm not putting myself in a position to deciding like where I stand things. I stand with my constituents, which is the entire Monroe County, and the way that they choose to proceed, I will support them. And that's in regards with the proposed annexation. So
thank you.
That's how I feel. So bringing that up, we're about 2.3 miles outside of the north of the proposed 7, the north part of the expansion being proposed. So yes, I just want to clarify that this is not an area intended for annexation, and it's about 2.3 miles out by the bird flies, you know. So I support my constituents, and whichever way they choose to move forward, I will continue to support them. And I support everyone in the community because I'm elected to office by the entire Monroe County citizens. So that's included the city and the town of Ellettsville. So I will support their decisions and the directions they go. But being 2.3 miles out, I don't know if we have done extensive, you know, public outreach to understand exactly what those residents in that particular area want. And I'm not going to speak for them, and I'm not going to advocate for density or anything like that, but I don't want to close the door on the idea of creating a little community market here. I think that's what was intended. It's been zoned that, and I don't know. Outside of that, you kind of have to go over county lines to get any other services or come into the city. So
thank you very much. And I know it's daunting following our discussion, but I would like to hear from the petitioner or the petitioner's representative. And you have 15 minutes to present to the members of the Plan Commission. Jackie, would you tell me who is here to speak on behalf of Dollar General?
Sure, Drew, if you quit the screen share, I'll pull up the timer. And then I believe Mr. John Kraft is here to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Kraft. Thank you.
Yes, Madam President. My name is John Kraft. I'm an attorney in New Albany, Indiana. The law firm I'm with is Young, Y-O-U-N-G, Lind, L-I-N-D, Indres, E-N-D-R-E-S, and Kraft, K-R-A-F-T. I represent the applicant, the petitioner in this, and certainly I appreciate all the comments made this evening. As we look at this, it coming before you for a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners, I would like to touch on Indiana Code 36744603, which are those 5 considerations that are in Mr. Meyer's report. And I think first and foremost, when we look at it, and I think there's been some discussion this evening with regards to the zoning determination as to why it was what it was. And I think the determination, as has been explained, is due to the size of this store. Mr. Garitas happened to make mention of Knox County and the Dollar General down there. We appreciate that. And certainly, Mr. Garitas, that is one that my client also developed, and that one's 20,000 square feet. So it's a bit bigger. But I do think in looking at 36744603, we have to look at, first and foremost, the issue pertaining to the comprehensive plan. I understand through Mr. Meyer's screen share as it relates to what this shows on the comprehensive plan, but I also think it's important that the comprehensive plan that was adopted in 2012 and became effective in March of 2012 does really not take into consideration the I-69 corridor and the effect of the appropriations or the condemnation that was done by the state of Indiana when it put I-69 through. As was indicated, and it was likewise on your screen as well, when the I-69 corridor went through, it specifically appropriated a number of that limited business zoning. And if you look at what would be in your printed report would be, I believe it's on page 58, it's going to show the zoning of that limited business and the proximity of that limited business to this new site. So when we look at the comprehensive plan, I think we have to take into consideration the fact that it was adopted in 2012. We're now almost 10 years after the fact, and there have been a number of changes, and certainly I appreciate the comments made by each of the commissioners this evening with regards to looking at this because what has happened out there at I-69. I think it's important to note that even in the staff report, in the summary, one of the elements that it used to be when 37 was there specifically indicated that a particular issue could not be had if there was a prohibited use like this if it was within 500 feet of the nearest lane of 37. Within the staff report, it specifically identifies the fact that given that I-69 is now present, this condition requiring that separation is no longer applicable. So it's relevant that the staff recognizes that in the one condition, and I think it's also important that we look at it from the standpoint of the conditions that have happened as the result of I-69. When we look at 3674-603 in the comprehensive plan, the next consideration is current conditions, current character of structures and uses. One of the commissioners this evening touched on the fact, and I do think it's an important piece, when the roundabout and the infrastructure improvements were made for I-69, as would be shown on, again, page 59 of your packet this evening, it reflects that the extended lanes, the larger lanes, go almost to the end of the frontage of this particular use. So we've got infrastructure improvements that have been made, and likewise, those should be taken into consideration when looking at 3674-603 on current conditions, current uses, and current structures. One of the items that was mentioned a little earlier was the possibility of maybe redeveloping the gas station. I can tell you that my clients looked into that, and Dollar General has looked at it from the standpoint, first of all, it's a gas station site. There are tanks still in the ground. I believe the price on that is $500,000, and it does not fit the image of what Dollar General likes to put out there and put to the public, as many of you have noted this evening. I think when we also look at most desirable use, this certainly is subjective, but while it is subjective, I think many of the comments this evening primarily focused upon the fact that when the I-69 takings took place and it removed a convenience type store, this is now a desirable use. And you've got individuals that are out there that desire this type of marketing for purposes of that use. And then property values, again, property values are much subjective. But once again, when we look at what the prices are from the standpoint of what my client has looked at, there's been no effect on prices as to what's being asked for the properties that are on the market now, or the properties that are being desired to be sold for these types of uses. It has not affected property values. In fact, more than likely, it's taken those in a positive note rather than in a negative. And then the last element under 3674-603 primarily deals with responsible development and growth. I take pride in the comments that were made this evening, because once again, I think many of you commissioners have recognized the fact that when 69 went through, the condemnations and appropriations took place and removed some of the limited business uses. You're now in a position where this is desired growth. This is the desire and the desirable use for this type of property for that community. We, of course, are here this evening to answer questions. We believe that when you take 3674-603 and you do look at the fact that the comprehensive plan is merely a guide, it is nothing more than a guide. It's not an ordinance, so it's not hard, fast law. 3674-603 says give due consideration to those 5 elements that are in the staff report. And certainly, I think when you give the due consideration to all 5 of those, taking into consideration the fact that, yes, we appeared before the committee, we got 4-0 favoring this with a unfavorable recommendation. When we appeared a week ago before the Plan Commission on an administrative level, we ended up with a number of positive comments. And a number of those positive comments were echoed this evening by those same individuals, understanding that this type of use is probably a use that should happen there. We're asking this evening that certainly we would like this matter to be forwarded to the county commissioners with a favorable recommendation. I do have with me this evening the engineer that is on the project and does a number of the Dollar General stores, Will McDonough. He can answer any questions you may have. Certainly this evening it is merely a land use, and we have provided what ultimately would be the plan if this would be approved. One of the items that I believe it was Commissioner Thomas had mentioned was this site maybe need to be larger. With this building on this site, there is actually 53.9% open space with this building going on this particular site. So we would like to move forward and develop this, and certainly my client is more than happy to talk with the commissioners to deal with this. But we believe this is an appropriate site when you look at the elements that I've outlined. And then likewise, while it's not part of a land use, it should give you some consideration with regards to the proposed development as to the plan that has been presented. While it is preliminary and subject to staff review, that's ultimately the store that you would tend to see if this would be approved. I'll take any questions you may have of me, and if any questions are of the engineer on the project, Mr. McDonough, he's here with me as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kraft. Mr. Wilson has his hand raised, and then Mr. Garatas.
I just want to comment on the question of Indiana 37 and I-69. Indiana 37 is a part of I-69. It's sort of I-69/Indiana 37. It's the same thing as Indiana 43, US 231 being the same road. Dave, you want to comment on that? I think we discussed this earlier. He's
Mr.
muted.
Schilling, Mr. Schilling.
Larry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, what I was going to say is the question was, we did not lose Indiana 37 when I-69 was completed. It's still part of the road system of the state of Indiana, and therefore the provisions in regard to distance from Indiana 37 still are in place in the ordinance.
Okay.
I think we've discussed this, haven't we?
Yeah, that I do not recall, but
okay. I mean, the NDOT site calls it Indiana 37/I-69/Indiana 37.
Yeah, I mean,
is all I'm saying.
That makes perfect sense to me because
and the signs still say that.
That's
yeah,
right.
I travel down to 37 to 69, and if I went further, I'd be back on 37. So I think that 37 is part of I-69.
And the other thing I wanted to throw out, I was going to mention this when I was discussing my interpretation of a grocery store, is one thing that would be very useful is if the petitioner would present a outline of their store, what items are going to be offered, because the Plan Commission might well want to place conditions on the rezoning that it actually address the issues of providing fresh vegetables, fruits, meats, milk, and so on to this portion of the county. And that may be something we want to bring back. This is the preliminary hearing. Unless the hearing is waived, it will go to the January meeting. And if we could get that kind of information for the benefit of the Plan Commission, there are a variety of Dollar Generals out there. So that kind of a commitment as to what would be in the store. We've done that before preliminarily with Dollar General stores, saying like, we'll call you a grocery store, but you have to have these items. So that kind of commitment would be very useful to incorporate in the recommendation to the commissioners.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Garatas?
You're on mute, BG.
You're still on mute, Bernie. Okay.
Yeah, I was cursing it. Okay, I pre-echo Larry's comments. I think that the petitioner should come back and give us a kind of a better idea, because I think with the residential component, what draws me to this as as not a should be here, but a could be here, is the fact that it could serve the neighborhood, or the residences in this area. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I think that Julie's point about a corridor of stores lining the interstate is what the comprehensive plan is trying to avoid. So maybe information as to how the visibility is going to be done from 69. If there's going to be a big sign that's erected above everything and glows the green and black or yellow and black Dollar General, so it's seen from the highway in a very obvious way, or I don't want to put any subjective terms in anybody's mind, but it might be interesting to know how that lighting is going to go, again, to feed as a neighborhood market versus a interstate chain. And then the other, I've got my own thoughts on this, but I would like for the engineer or Mr. Kraft to maybe address Julie's observation that there's no sewer in this area. And if they can do that this evening, I think that may be a nice way to segue into the potential for another the final meeting. So that's all I've got right now, Margaret. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gerhardt's. And Mr. Kraft or Mr. McDonough, if you would like to address Mr. Gerhardt's question.
Yes, I'm going to, Madam President, I'm going to let Mr. McDonough address those because he's the more appropriate person. I can do the legal side of it, but I can't do the sewer. A lot of people might say otherwise about attorneys as far as sewers, but I'll leave that piece alone.
Thank you very much. Hello, Mr. McDonough. Thank you for joining us tonight. And if you could address Mr. Gerhardt's question, we'd be most grateful.
Yes, we anticipated that this site would be on a septic. We've done septic for current Dollar Generals that we've done in the last 2 years even in Indiana, meeting the state health board requirements. These typically are not large in size, as there's only a men's and women's bathroom and a water fountain that would be treated in typical Dollar General fashion. The area to the south of this building is reserved for the septic field, and it's typically not any larger than a random 3-bedroom home. And of course, this all goes through the state and approved from the state for this project. I hope that answered the question as best it could.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wilson, your hand is still raised. I don't know if you intend that.
I did not. I will lower it.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Nestor Jelen?
Just to address Bernie's other question about the signs proposed, Drew has on the screen and he can point with his cursor towards the driveway on East Sample Road. Off to the right of the driveway, there is a little bold line. There you go, Drew. I believe that's the indication of a pole sign location, but I'd be wanting to confirm with their engineer.
Thank you very much. I don't believe there's any further action to take this evening except to hear from members of the public. Mr. Enright Randolph?
Yes, I just kind of had a general request, I guess, from planning or the petitioner. Could we just get like a little quick map of like the closest convenience store or grocery store to kind of have displayed? I'm just kind of curious, and I know that wouldn't take too much time and effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pittsford? You're muted.
Yeah, I thought I clicked it. Sorry. I just want to ask, and it's a comparison thing for staff to work on. I wonder what the per bedroom gallonage requirement is for our septic. You know, and so you look at, when we determine septic size, we look at residents in a home, they're based on a certain rate. And then to the extent possible, and I realize this may be a tall order, you know, because you're literally comparing apples, not literally, but you're comparing apples to oranges. So what would the average customer inflow into this building be compared to the average household usage based on bedrooms? So I hope that made sense. I'm not sure it really did. It's a tough question to ask, but if they're going to be on septic, I want to be sure it's sized appropriately. And I really don't know how you size commercial properties versus residential.
Okay,
So
thank you, Mr.
that's all I
Pittsford.
wanted.
And before moving on to the public, we'll hear from Mr. Wilson and then we'll turn to the public. Mr. Wilson?
I just want to respond to Jerry's question. This would be a commercial on-site sewage disposal system, and we require a permit from the Indiana Department of Health. They have standards in the regulation in regard to how to size commercial septic systems. So it would be addressed at the state level.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Wilson. Now I'd like to open the floor to the public. Are there members of the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition? If so, please raise your hand or press *9 on your telephone if you're calling in. And Jackie, let me know if you see anyone. Okay. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak in opposition to this petition? Okay, there are none. Well, this matter, unless there's a motion to the an otherwise motion, this matter will move to our next meeting of the Plan Commission in January. So I'd like to thank Mr. Kraft and Mr. McDonough for coming tonight and for describing to us your intentions and your proposal and your petition. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're moving on to the last item on the agenda, and that is ZOA-21-12, and this is the amendment to the Monroe County zoning ordinance pertaining to sign permit requirements, timelines, permit exemptions for small signs and temporary signs. And this is Mr. Wilson.
Larry.
Yeah, I can. You want me to jump in there?
Sure.
Yeah, I think Dave should do the preface. This is in response to the current litigation in federal court. Accordingly, I would like Dave to address that.
All right. Yes, thanks.
Thank
Yeah, as Larry noted, we put this together in response to the Judge Sweeney's decision in the Geft versus Monroe County case. And in a broad overview, the judge found two provisions of the county zoning ordinance to be problematic. One was the permit provisions, and the other was the variance provisions. And the concern that the court had was based on the concept of a prior restraint. And the definition of that is any law forbidding certain communications when issued in advance of the time that such communications are to occur. So the court is concerned that a permit process or a variance process could be used to sort of slow walk, or put a blanket veto on somebody's exercise of free speech, and effectively censor speech. So the Judge Sweeney was concerned that our permit provisions did not have timelines. And I think the concern with our variance was that the state mandated variance standards infused the process with too much discretion, and he wanted that tightened up. So we have two problems we're trying to address, and we've been enjoined by Judge Sweeney from issuing permits or issuing variances. So we have two problems to address. The permit problem is, we think, a more pressing problem because we issue a lot more signed permits than we do sign variances. So we're going to deal with the sign variance. It's a little tougher problem to deal with, and we're going to take some time on that. But I think this is just trying to get the ball rolling. We wanted to start the process of perhaps making some ordinance amendments that would be acceptable to the court, so that we could go back to the court and ask it to lift its injunction on our permit process. And eventually, we hope to come up with some ordinance provisions that will persuade the Judge Sweeney to lift the injunction on the variance process as well. So this is just the first step in the process. Wanted to get the conversation going. This ordinance basically just puts some timelines into our permitting process, which I think was the main concern of the court. So there's a timeline for responding to permit applications, making a decision, appealing that, and getting an appellate decision from the BZA on a signed permit decision. So we think those address what the court was concerned about, but we wanted to put these out there for your consideration and review and comment. And again, we don't have to do anything tonight on this, but we wanted to get the ball rolling. So that's why this is here.
Okay, is there any discussion from members of the Plan Commission? I'm sorry that you can tell that I'm trying to rush this along a little bit. Some of us have another commitment at the County Council this evening. So that being said, I don't want to stultify or halt any discussion on this. But if you would please raise your hand if you'd like to weigh in on this sign ordinance, I'd be grateful. Well, Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, I just want to comment, it's unfortunate that we're enjoined from issuing permits for signs. We just got an email from an applicant saying, what standards apply? How do I do this? And so on. And we're just going to have to say, here's the chapter, you're on your own. Because the judge also allows us to enforce against anyone who puts up the sign in the wrong place, or is too big, or is in the wrong location. So it's again, it's unfortunate. That being said, this is something we just can't rush through because we don't really regulate speech, we regulate structures. The cases cited by the district court were primarily a parade permit and the location of newspaper boxes. If you make a mistake in issuing a permit for a parade, you can always change the route of the parade during the course of the parade. If you make a mistake with a location of a newspaper box, you can pick the newspaper box up and move it. If you make a mistake in the placement of a pole sign or a monument sign, and it's in the right of way or over an optical cable line or on somebody else's property or whatever, you can imagine the circumstances that come up. And we have had situations where somebody has put up a very expensive monument sign in the right of way, and partially in the right of way, partially on somebody else's property. Okay, it's not very pleasant for the landowner when that occurs. So we want to be very careful that we don't rush the process. And so what we're working on right now is how do we set a bright line on when that time period should begin. And unfortunately, I think what we're going to have to do is require an increased burden on the part of the applicant to provide certified site plans for pole signs and monument signs that are signed off as to where the easements are, how far from the property line. We can no longer rely upon hand sketches as far as the location of these signs. But we're working on that. We're looking at other ordinances around the country. One other thing I do want to mention is that there's a major case pending in the U.S. Supreme Court now with the city of Austin versus Reagan, which is a case regarding billboards and whether or not the distinction between on-premise and off-premise signs are constitutional or not. whether it's appropriate under the First Amendment or is it unconstitutional distinction based upon content. I listened to the oral argument a couple of weekends ago, and it's fascinating. I don't think you can predict what the Supreme Court is going to do. I can guarantee you it will not be unanimous, and yet we are supposed to interpret the constitutionality of permits as they come in on a daily basis. The American Planning Association has done an excellent amicus brief, a friend of the court brief, which they filed with the Supreme Court. The International Sign Association also filed a brief with the Supreme Court, and I copy David and Jackie with those, and we'll send it out to the entire Plan Commission because it's an excellent summary of the concerns in regard to signage and kind of a history of the constitutionality of signage. And one interesting thing is Justice Kavanaugh actually quoted from the American Planning Association, friend of the court brief, and he basically says the current case law, constitutional law, basically puts planners in the wilderness in a tent without a flashlight. And I think that really accurately depicts where we are right now. And I seriously think it may not be a bad idea for us to wait until the Supreme Court issues their wisdom before we make any substantial changes to our ordinance. And if it's unfortunate that it may impact certain applicants for signs, if it's delayed, but again, we don't have any guidance. We're told what's wrong, but not what's right. Dave, any other comments?
Yeah, yeah, the Supreme Court, sometimes it takes 6 months to get a decision out of them. So I guess my preference would be to deal with the permit issue long before that, because I think it's a lot simpler problem. And the Supreme Court's really kind of focusing on the off-premise, on-premise distinction in that Reagan case. So that ultimately may have an impact on our ordinance as well. So we'll just have to see. But Larry's exactly right. There's been the sign decisions over the last 50 years have just been all over the map. There's no really unanimous direction coming from the Supreme Court. So it really makes it difficult to predict how a court will decide on any specific provision. So clarity is what's desired, and I think the planning amicus brief that Larry talked about, the American Planning Association basically said, we really don't care what you do, just make it clear so we know what we have to do. And that's kind of the situation we're in. So we'll see what happens.
Well, that's really interesting context, Mr. Wilson and Mr. Schilling. Thank you for sharing that with us. I'd like to see if there are any members of the public who would like to comment on this proposed sign ordinance. And is Mr. Wilson, are you raising your hand again?
I thought I'd lowered it, and then apparently I did.
Okay.
I don't see anyone else.
I'll lower it again.
Okay, well, I don't see anyone, and this will just be continued to our January meeting. Is that correct, this item?
Yes, a question for Dave would be, I know you have a court hearing on this in the second week of January. Are you hoping to continue this item to the administrative session of the January meeting, or do you want to just hear it at the regular meeting?
That would be up to the Plan Commission. If they continue it to the administrative meeting and we could make suitable progress on the permit issues, then it could be dealt with at that time. But that's up to the Plan Commission.
Commissioner Thomas?
They have time.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yeah, I would just as soon hear this again at the administrative meeting, but I think I want some clarity on what are the pros and cons. I would like to see a good debate on whether or not it's appropriate to pass something like this now. I've heard both sides, and both sides are compelling, but they don't agree with each other. So if we could get a real clarity on what we'd be agreeing to and what the problems could be with what we agree to, or what the problems could be if we don't do it, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
I agree. So is there a motion to continue this to the administrative meeting?
So moved.
Second.
And Mr. Wilson, will you please call the roll?
Okay. The motion, I don't think we need to call a roll. I think it automatically goes to the
Okay.
next meeting.
Well, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone for their deliberate service all this year. And we've lost some valuable people on our planning staff. We didn't really get to appropriately say goodbye to Rebecca Payne. So I really thought she did a wonderful job. And I think all of the staff is doing a wonderful job. And Mr. Wilson, we appreciate you. Mr. Schilling, we appreciate you. Tammy Behrman, Jackie Nestor, Ann Crecilius, Drew Myers. We just really appreciate all the hard work that you do, and Rachel Henry as well, and Barb in the office. We really appreciate all of the hard work you do. And thanks to all of the members of the Plan Commission as well for your good thoughts, your good service, and your dedication to our community.
Bring on the new year.
Margaret, this is Larry. I may have misspoke in the fact that if we want to send this on to the administrative meeting, we should probably continue the hearing to the administrative meeting, just to make sure that it's clear that the hearing, that it will be a hearing at the administrative committee.
I
Okay,
move that
let's,
this
Madam
be sent
President,
forward to
if
the
you-
administrative meeting for a hearing.
I'll second. I don't know
okay.
how you
Okay, the
beat
motion-
me, Jerry.
Okay, the motion is continue the matter in regard to the changes to the sign ordinance procedure, ordinance revisions to the January administrative meeting, which I believe is on January 4th. Is that correct?
Can't wait. 2022,
20
here we come.
2022.
Okay.
And hopefully we'll be recovered by then. A
Yeah.
vote in favor is a vote to continue the hearing to that meeting. Margaret Clemens,
Yes.
Trondheim Wright Randolph,
Yes.
Oh, you're muted, Larry. Sorry.
All right, I'll just do it. I think Larry's iPad got cut off, so let me just continue. Sorry, Dee Owens,
Yes.
Amy Thompson,
Yes.
Jim Stainbrook,
Yes.
Julie Thomas,
Yes.
Bernie Garitas,
Yes.
Margaret Clemens,
Yes.
Jerry Pittsford.
Yes.
Okay, and then Tron already said yes, so that was unanimous.
Motion to
Okay.
adjourn.
Any objections? Raise them now.
I'm sorry. I had a technical difficulty here. Bernie Garitas.
Oh, we already did it, Larry, sorry. We're good.
You're
You
too
just wanna
late,
hear me
Larry.
say yes twice.
We're past you.
I'm
You're
already
too late, Larry.
I'm already superfluous.
Rearview mirror, Larry, rearview mirror.
Get your second dessert.
Happy holidays, everyone. Merry
Nice
everything.
job, Margaret.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Yes,
Hey.
Margaret. God bless
Thanks.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks everybody for your service this year. You've been great.
Yes, thank you.